Deadwind, or Karppi, Season 2 is almost entirely in Finnish. There are some scenes of English and Estonian, and if you haven't seen my review of Season 1 of this show, suffice to say that I didn't have great things to say about it. I described it as a bit of a grab bag for the themes and tropes that are normally found in Nordic noir without any of the substance that makes the good shows what they are. And you may ask yourself, if you have the time, will I do this whole thing in rhyme? To which I answer, no, piss off. Season 2, and there were so many improvements made to this season. The main characters Karppi and Nurmi are back, and this time they feel more legit. Karppi herself was never a problem in the first season. I liked the actress and I liked her character. She felt maybe a little bit forced and a little bit of a rip-off of Saga Norén. Even her character's name, Sophia, may be a subtle nod to Sophia Helene, who played Saga, but she was overall fine. But her partner Nurmi wasn't so convincing or engaging. All that I really remember about Season 1 is that I don't remember any of it. The whole thing just felt kind of dry. Not so with Season 2. I actually felt for Karppi. I understood all her decisions, even her bad ones. I felt real sympathy for her. And I think it's the first time that I've ever felt like the main cop character shouldn't be a cop. A lot of shows try to make you feel like this about their main character, but with Karppi it actually succeeds. This time around, the personal stuff that's going on felt both real and related. Often in crime dramas, the cops' personal lives feel like they're there because the writers aren't sure what else to write. Or sometimes the cops and their personal lives feel so connected to the actual case they're investigating, you just feel, well, now it's too big a coincidence. With this season of Karppi, it felt like it struck a nice balance. This whole show, the crimes and how everything was tied together, was just better thought out. With Season 1, they could have been making it up as they went. There was really no rhyme or reason to it. This season was much more crafted. I'm not comparing it with The Missing or Tabula Rasa or something, but it felt much better planned out than Season 1 was, and I think if you were to watch it again, it would make a lot more sense. Also, the excitement was always there. My heart was racing at least once per episode. To be fair, yes, some of the suspense scenes were kind of shoehorned in there. There are times that they end up in chases and shootouts that are highly unlikely. Also, Helsinki seems to have a huge number of abandoned warehouses and other big buildings. It felt almost post-apocalyptic, like everywhere they go they end up in some huge building with no light and a lot of doors and not a lot else. But the important thing is it kept moving, it kept paced and interesting. I do, however, feel that some characters are not quite well introduced enough for us to really feel who they are when their name comes up. This is one disadvantage that I've always felt comes from watching with subtitles. It's hard enough to remember a character whom we meet like once or twice if you only hear their name. But when you watch with subtitles, you don't so much listen as you do read. So sometimes the cops will be drawing out these conclusions and they'll get to the sort of climax of the conclusion like, so the only person who could have been there at that time with a gun was Markku Possi. And you're like, who? This is probably a bit of a trade-off with the very straight, literal style of Nordic noir. If you compare it to something like a Guy Ritchie film, those films will have these sort of stylistic inserts of all the characters they're talking about, because otherwise it would be almost impossible to follow those movies. But the canon of Nordic crime is very procedural rather than stylistic, and I think that sometimes can hurt them just a little bit, especially with English-speaking audiences. I'm not suggesting that they should tailor their series to our tastes, they definitely shouldn't. I'm just saying that it does make it hard for us. Speaking of complicated storylines, politics was once again involved, but this time it was definitely better than the first season. When I think of politics crossing over with a murder mystery, The Killing from Denmark comes straight to mind. But to be honest, with The Killing, it always felt like it was a little bit ham-handed. Yes, both stories were good in all 3 seasons of The Killing, but at times it felt a little bit like it was the rules that they had to have these 2 simultaneous storylines. So it felt like the politics story would continue even when there wasn't a lot left to say. With Deadwind Season 2, it felt like a bit of a lighter touch. Even though the politicians are at the front and centre, it still felt more necessary rather than forced. Yet I will say that the respect to their Nordic noir ancestors was more apparent, even if more genuine. The political aspect of this did feel like a nod to The Killing, which I'm fine with. And then, and this is where I'm not sure if it's deliberate or not, there is discussion of a literal tunnel to be built between Finland and Estonia, aka a connecting piece of road between two countries. Now, this may be because this is a discussion that Finland and Estonia are having right now. I don't know, but it felt bridge-esque without feeling like plagiarism. And while we're on the topic of Estonia, I love it when shows depict the use of language realistically. And there's one moment, which wouldn't even be spoilers, but I still don't want to give it away. I want people to experience this moment for themselves, because it's so rare to have this kind of linguistic detail in a show. And Karppi demonstrates that it can be done, and it doesn't take an extra 10 minutes, it takes like 10 seconds, and it makes it more convincing. The other thing that the Estonian connection brought to Deadwind was that at times it's hard to feel like the Nordic cities are actually dangerous places. I read and watch heaps of Nordic stuff, almost exclusively Nordic stuff actually, and a lot of people meet unfortunate ends in the stuff that I watch and read. But in reality, we know that these countries are actually very safe places, including Estonia, I checked, but just having this global smuggling aspect to it really made me feel like Helsinki could be a dark and dangerous city. However, on the topic of being more convincing, there are a few things that bring that aspect down somewhat, a few of which are technical and some of which are aspects of the plot. There is one scene that has the fakest blood that you will see this side of 1990. Now, normally I don't like bringing attention to this kind of stuff because I feel like once you see it, it can't be unseen and you may not have noticed it otherwise. But with this one, I guarantee you will notice it. It looks like red paint. I'm assuming it is actually red paint, and you see it not just once but a few times. It looks completely ridiculous. There's also some weird things going on with frame rates in some of the shots. Some of them seem to have been shot at a higher frame rate, which means that when played back they're in slow motion, but I'm not talking about things that should be in slow motion. There'll just be these random single shots of little things that don't matter, and they'll be in slow motion and it seems really out of place. And then at other times they've done the opposite of that, which is to film at a lower frame rate so that when it's played back it appears faster, except that it doesn't actually appear fast, it just appears really jolty, like some sped up thing from the 1980s or something. And it's weird because it's out of line with the rest of this series, which really looks really good. And it's just a bit of a shame because although these things don't ruin the series, the rest of it has some really beautiful cinematography. Overall, the quality of this aspect improved from season 1, which was already quite decent. The light in particular was gorgeous. It may even be my favourite of the Nordic shows when it comes to lighting. So the director of photography really knows what they're doing here, but it must be like shooting schedules or equipment hire or something is stopping every shot from looking quite as polished as it could. And the editing is kind of the same. At times it feels a bit like the music was placed over the scenes before the final cut was made, because at times the music stopping feels very abrupt and sometimes there's not even a tiny bit of a fade, it's just a smash cut. And that's actually the opposite of what we've become used to in the last 20 years. We normally expect score to go right over the cut and sort of band-aid the whole thing completely and make these scenes feel like they go together. And just seeing the polar opposite of that felt kind of jarring. I know I'm getting a little bit theoretical here. I did sort of major in film music at uni, so you'll have to forgive me. But it just felt like the music and the editing didn't quite bring everything out of this script that was good and this shooting, this cinematography that was also good. And the last thing I'll say about it before I summarize is that the first 5 to 6 episodes maintain a balance of excitement with suspension of disbelief. In episodes 7 and 8, everything gets a little bit out of hand. It's not that I could never be convinced by some of these events, it just felt a lot more grandiose than the otherwise fairly down-to-earth series. Like at times you were watching a Nordic noir that then just became Batman. But overall, this is probably one of the biggest upgrades from a part 1 to a second part of any film or any series I've ever seen. Still a couple of things holding it back, but it's very exciting that they were able to maintain the same kind of feel from seasons 1 to season 2, but still step everything up so significantly. And if there is ever a season 3, which there's sort of vague hints that there might be, then I'll be right there ready to go. So with season 2 of Deadwind, it wound up that I would suggest that you watch it. Suggest being 8 out of 10 on my scale, which is much higher than I expected to give this season. So guys, if you've watched this far, I thank you for doing so. You may want to consider supporting me on Patreon to help me do this more often. I upload language learning articles there, but I'm also hoping to start doing some Reykjavik review exclusive stuff there, bonus videos and whatnot. If not, that's totally fine. Check out any of the links in the description. Leave me a comment. Make sure you're subscribed, all that stuff. There should be new reviews coming very, very soon because I'm filming a couple today. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.